Will the soundtrack kindly produce a sound? Go on. Don't be nervous. Go ahead. Any sound. Well, that isn't quite what I had in mind.
Take two. Well, dude, I have something we could start with. This could be our warm-up question.
Okay.
I can read the question that we got that was submitted by...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. By a very close friend of mine. Let's see. Here's the question. How do you practice riding the line of being a Christian ready to stand for your faith, but also a fun person for unbelievers to be around? How do we keep our saltiness while remaining a believer who is ready to testify for Christ?
Dang.
That's the question.
I don't know about a warm-up. That's like jumping right in. No, that's a great question. I feel like it's really hard to put into... It can be hard to put into like actionable words, but for me, it's always been, don't do the things that other people do. Like I've always tried to have my actions speak louder than my words. And then when people came around and were like, hey, what do you think about this? Or like, this topic or this question, or they would push back against Christianity in some way, I made sure I was prepared. Or if I didn't know the answer to the question, I would say, dude, that's a great question. Let me get back to you. And I would say it's a very good sign if your friends that are non-believers are asking you questions and noticing that you do things differently. That alone to me is like a sign that you're on the right track in terms of how you're acting. And then of course, I think it's simple in the sense of if someone directly challenges you, you don't back down from that.
Yeah.
Be courageous in that, for sure. But you don't have to go around all the time rubbing it in other people's faces. I think that's what puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And that's what makes them not want to be around some Christians, is that they're constantly having this self-righteous, like, what you're doing is wrong. Like, they don't want to hear that. They really want to hear, in my experience, a lot of people that I've become friends with have just had me around because I wasn't that type of Christian.
Yeah. Yeah, I would probably say the same for me.
And then it opened doors once we had a relationship, and they could tell I wasn't going to flip out if they said like, oh yeah, I got drunk last night, or yeah, I slept with this girl, or I did this thing, or I did this drug or whatever. When they saw that I wasn't just immediately judging them and condemning them, they would sort of kind of open up a little bit more, and then you saw their questions come out. I saw their questions come out.
Yeah.
How is it for you though?
Well, let me ask you, when do you think there's a line, I guess, as to, for instance, if someone is maybe saying something that, maybe like saying something in a group setting or something that is just, I don't want to say something that you disagree with, because I don't know. I'm just trying to think of I'm trying to put myself in a scenario. of like you're in a
Yeah.
group setting, maybe someone says something that's just kind of out of pocket, or I don't know, like do you think there is a situation where you would feel the need to, I guess, defend your faith?
Honestly, a lot of times it came when someone was talking about someone else behind their back in front of me. Like, that's a really good example, I think, where I would say, hey, guys, come on. Like, would you want someone else talking like this behind your back? I don't want to hear this. And just that alone, a lot of times is sort of jolts them to be like, either shut up, we're going to go have this conversation somewhere else, or sort of like, dang, he's kind of right. We are kind of being mean.
Yeah.
I just think you have to use wisdom and discernment, and
Yeah, for sure. I do think a lot of it
always easy.
is to maintain that saltiness, right? That, I guess, because I feel like the goal of being Christ-like is Christ was attracted to people. Like, people were drawn to his personality.
Yes.
Because he was very loving, his compassion, his kindness. I mean, who wouldn't be drawn to that?
Yeah.
And so, as a believer, that's what I want to strive for. I want people to be drawn to my gentle, this is the train. Should we just wait?
You were saying?
What were we? Saltiness.
Yes.
Yes. So for me to be in a setting around people who aren't, believers, whatever, or of a different faith, or whatever that may be, my goal, I feel like, should be to be like Christ, where people are drawn to my kindness, are drawn to my compassion for them, my willingness to listen, and to meet their needs if I'm able. But as you said, to be prepared at the same time, to be prepared for when questions come up, or even challenges come up to your faith or to whatever it is that you believe in, then to not respond in a way that's condemning or out of spite or anything of that nature, but instead to respond in love as Jesus would do. I think a lot of it reminds me of that whole, you were kind of talking about this with jiu-jitsu. It reminds me of that quote of, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And so having that, being prepared, being able to guard your faith and guard your beliefs, but you're not, in a sense, like going to war against people like these, right?
I think you kind of hold the line for truth. I think Jesus was the perfect duality of grace and truth, or love and truth. And typically people swing more to one side or the other. So if you're more on the truth side and you see a situation happen and you're quick to speak out, speak your mind, that's a pretty good trait if it's used wisely. Work on grace, work on loving people a little bit more. If you're more on the grace side, more on the love side, work up the courage a little bit more, be more prepared in your
Yeah, for sure.
defense and stuff like that to speak out in truth
Yeah.
when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And there's just no hard and fast rule of when it's appropriate. It's just that's the point of having a relationship with the Holy Spirit, with God, is to be led in those scenarios. And you won't be perfect. You'll miss some opportunities. You'll speak out when you shouldn't have, and we learn from that. We move on.
Yeah. And we talked about this on, I think Thursday night, where we just mentioned how it's interesting how through the Gospels you see how Jesus almost never went out of his way to challenge the Pharisees or the religious leaders. There were instances where he would kind of provoke them, like when he reads when he reads Isaiah, and he would do things that he knew would make them upset, I guess. But most times he wasn't going out of his way directly to challenge them.
Mm-hmm.
Most times they came to him because he knew that his business was just loving the people that were in need of it, that were the people that were spiritually poor. And then when the religious leaders came to him to challenge him, he was ready.
Pieced him up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really good example.
And obviously I wouldn't say that, like, I'm definitely not an expert in evangelism in any sense, or
I mean, you do have a
whatever.
degree in Bible and theology, but
I mean,
that's, I would say,
I guess.
a level above the average person.
Yeah, but there's so many different ways to do ministry, and there's
For
so
sure.
many different ways to evangelize to people. But obviously, I think the best example we could look to is Jesus and the way that he ministered to people and the way that he acted around people. So I think the idea is to not go. It's not like you're going out there looking for a fight.
Yes. Like, you're not the guy on the side of the road that says, repent of your sin or you're going to hell.
Yeah.
There's a little garden snake over there. No way.
No way.
He's climbing into the bricks towards the fire.
Seriously?
What do you do? What do you do? Oh, he's going after the cricket. Oh. He's gone now.
Freaking Animal Planet back here?
Dude, it is. Maybe he's just trying to get warm or something.
Maybe. Glad we could provide that for him.
Yeah. If you can't tell already, this is a fireside chat, so it's a little slower tempo than our regular interviews.
Yeah.
So just sit back, relax. Maybe you can hear the crackle of the fire. If you're watching, maybe you can see it too.
Just close your eyes.
Except if you're driving, don't close your eyes if you're driving. But relax. Feel all that tension in your shoulders from work or school or family life, whatever it is. Just come chill.
Well, dude. Take us in. Take us in.
We've had something cooking here today, and I feel like as we gain our courage, we continue to go more and more levels deeper into this. I feel like, and as God kind of reveals it to us, but we're going through this book. I'm going through this book that Zach gave me called Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard, and it is really reintroducing us to the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God as Jesus intended it, and how often we as humans misunderstand what he said. A lot of times we just take him as a new set of laws instead of a way of being. And
Yeah.
a disclaimer at the beginning of this, we we're talking about this and we're so passionate about it because we are these people that we're talking about. Like we felt this and we just want something better, something different, something, what I mean is we want something more, we want something as close as possible to what Jesus intended. Yeah. We feel like we're not getting that right now. And so we're trying to drill down into that. And so while I was reading one of Dallas Willard's sections, he was talking about the local church and often how far it can be, how far we have kind of deviated from what Jesus intended. And he quoted a guy named Clyde Reed. And so Clyde Reed, I was like, dang, did he write a book or like maybe an essay or something? And so I looked him up. Sure enough, he wrote a book called The God Evaders in 1966.
The God Evaders?
Yes, that's what the book's called, God Evaders.
See, that title is fire.
Holy
crap.
I know. And so the whole thesis of his book is that pretty much what I just mentioned is that we as church people, we care about our faith, we care about our body of believers, but we also, and because of that, we understand our fallen nature as humans. And he mentions himself in the introduction of the book, how he has buried his head in the sand for years, but has just finally could not stand it any longer and has got to just try to come out with something that can help people understand how we can live a more fulfilled Christian life, not just for ourselves, but to bring this to other people that don't know Jesus.
Yeah.
And so,
how far did you get into the book?
I'm literally in chapter 1. Everything
Really?
everything that I read to you already, chapter 1.
Really?
Yeah. It's kind of insane. So yeah, I just want to point this out. This is not a new problem. It was written in 1966. You can go back way further than that throughout church history. And so this is just the nature of how humans have distorted God's perfection. And our mission sort of is to always be combating that through relying on God. And so one of his quotes in here is basically, I wanted to read it to you real quick. The ordinary day-to-day life of the average successful local church makes a mockery out of its world-influencing revolutionary claims. It is customary for all of us to lay the blame for public indifference to religion at the door of secularism and materialism in our age. It is my personal opinion that neither of these does us as much harm as does the constant parade of trivialities which the typical church program offers to the public. So what he's talking about there is like, we tend to blame the lack of depth in our Christian lives inside of the local church on the exterior world. But in fact, things that we do, like certain men and women's groups, certain, maybe if you have a choir at your church, or all of these different activities or programs that we do.
Trivialities. Yeah,
that's what he's talking about. These sort of trivial things we make up in the church to do. This program, he says, is only rarely related to the real issues which are clawing the soul of modern man to shreds. Fireline.
Gosh, dude.
This program speaks with no commanding voice to the multitudes perishing for lack of certainty, meaning that the things that we're doing in church have no commanding voice to the people that we're trying to reach who are looking for certainty. They're looking for truth. But what we're doing right now is clearly not appealing to them, and that's evident in the regressing statistics, the falling statistics of people attending church.
You're saying that today, or are you still reading?
I'm saying that today. Okay, I'm explaining his sentence. Now again, he says, this program gives the distinct impression that it is concerned exclusively with its own self-preservation, meaning that we're not necessarily sitting in a Bible study saying, yeah, we're really doing this to build our local church or to stay comfortable. We're not really saying that. No one's really necessarily intending to do that,
right?
Particularly, but that's actually how it's coming about. And he says, what most churches are habitually doing is so little related to anything except their own hand-to-mouth existence that the public cannot imagine in what way they can possibly influence the great affairs of the world. Meaning that churches are so focused on hand-to-mouth existence, or getting money into the church so it can continue to survive month to month, or keeping the people happy that are inside the church, that people outside the church can't imagine how they could even influence the great affairs of the world. And he continues on, lastly, what the local church has become makes it impossible for the average American to take its life-shaking gospel seriously. Its day-to-day triviality is its own worst enemy. Gosh, dude. Man, that hurts. It hurts to hear.
He just lays it out there, man. He just lays it out there.
And that's what we're frustrated about.
Yes.
Because we believe in the gospel. We believe in Jesus. We believe in the local church. And we love the local church. Awesome. Nice little built-in brakes.
Yeah. I think that wood's over a year old now, dude.
We believe in the local church. We really do. And we want to see it thrive. We want to thrive in it, dude. That's what all this is coming from.
Yes.
It's from a place of us wanting to thrive inside of our local church.
Well, to be completely honest, dude, it's becoming increasingly more difficult for me to say that I believe in the local church.
Mm.
I believe in the intent of the local church. I believe that, like we've said in previous episodes, most believers, like most Christians, have good intent in that they are sincere in their pursuit of Christ, in their pursuit of ministry, whatever it is that, the local church has to offer in terms of building up people's faith. People are sincerely and genuinely in pursuit of that.
Mm.
I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't be the judge of that as far as people's hearts. But it's like what he said, dude. Clyde, what's his last name?
Reed.
Clyde Reed. How this whole machine that we've created, how it just, the way he phrases that, how, I forget how exactly he says it, but how your soul, it claws at the soul of man, to where it feels like your soul is just being shredded. Like, it's like the more I've gotten plugged in at a local church, it's like the more empty my soul feels. The more yeah, I guess really just empty. I feel like you just get caught up doing all these things to do ministry,
Yeah.
And effort is not the problem. Sincerity is not the problem. It's just, I go and read the Gospels. I go and read the Bible, Acts. I read what the apostles, how they lived. And then I look at my life and the state of the church, and it just doesn't seem like they are equal, you know? It seems like something's off.
Yes.
And for so long, I've wrestled with that. And like you've talked about, you have too. And Clyde Reed just puts into words all those feelings that I've had.
Yes.
So well. And it was written in the 60s, dude. That's crazy. That is so crazy.
There's truly nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. And like you said, it really is nothing new, because these are things that the church has dealt with for centuries.
Yeah.
You go back to, like you said, you go back to Martin Luther, and the church had lost its way. It was selling indulgences to people. It was doing all these, people couldn't read the Bible for themselves. They were just doing all these religious practices, and they lost track of, I don't know, I guess, of what it looks like to truly pursue a relationship with Christ.
Yes.
To really pursue Christ as a true disciple. So it's really encouraging to hear you read that, to hear that I'm not the only one. That we're not the only ones that feel that.
Because it feels that way a lot. It feels very lonely.
Yes.
And so I think the issue becomes that the church does not function the way it was meant to, through this sort of immaturity, let's call it, or incongruency. And so what he says is while it's not the whole truth to say that churches are self-centered, there's enough truth in it to cause considerable alarm. For I'm convinced that many non-churchgoers see the churches that way, and with justification. And he gives another quotation. What will we think of the crew of a life-saving station who gave all their attention to the station itself, made the quarters attractive, planted gardens, designed uniforms, provided music, and thus pleasantly occupied, shut out the roar of pounding breakers, driving ships and men to destruction on the rocks? Incredible, we would say, and rightly. Yet is such a fancy far removed from a church, so intent on its own interior life, its housing, its decorations, its material well-being, that the plight of those outside in need of salvation in Christ are forgotten or become subordinate to other things. The church is not a company on a summer hotel porch. It is a life-saving crew.
Holy crap! Did you read that earlier tonight?
No.
Holy.
No, that was saving
bro.
that one for the ace in the hole.
Well, it delivered. Wow. What a great way to put it. I mean, that's so, it's just completely in line with what we talked about in episode, 4? With Jesse and Shelley.
Yes, dude.
How we have this system of, we give to the church, they give, I mean, this is just one example of this whole thing that we're talking about. But if you want to talk about giving, just giving, you give your money to the church, and then that money is dispersed to lights, to equipment, to then somewhere down the line, then to a homeless shelter or to missionaries or whatever. And then that money is dispersed to the lights and the equipment, everything for the homeless shelter. And then all this, it's like, you could do that, or you could just go and give to the homeless person, like.
So I'm so glad you said that, because he mentioned something here in chapter 1 as well, where he talks about how basically when he was writing this book, about 18% of all of the money given to a church yearly actually went to things outside of the church.
18%?
Yeah, in 1966.
Dude, I would be very curious to know what that number is now.
Yeah, 100%. It's from he said, from recent statistics published by the National Council of Churches. So that's in 1966. So
18%.
Listen to this. He says, it must be apparent that only a small percentage is assigned to work that directly aids the poor, the deprived, and the outcasts of society, or those outside the church membership. While we must admit that some extremely worthwhile projects are thereby supported, and some excellent work is being done with church funds, the vast majority of funds received by the churches are used for support of local programs and buildings. One may argue that the use of 82% of the funds received to support the local church program is money well spent, for it is in the local church that the church is at work in the world. Basically saying that the 18% is what's used outside the church, so the rest of it, the 82%, is what's used inside the church.
Yeah.
Most would argue that, well, if the body of Christ is at work in local churches, it's money well spent.
Yeah. Yes.
He says,
fair argument.
Yeah, right? So he says, it is the thesis of this book that such is not the case. Rather, the significance of the statistics cited reveals that we who are in the local churches spend most of our contributions on our own Christian education and nurture, with little positive result in terms of mission or thrust outward to the world.
Read that again, dude.
For the people in the back?
Yeah. My brain is still catching up from the last sentence.
Okay. It is the thesis of this book that such is not the case. Rather, the significance of the statistics cited reveals that we who are in the local churches spend most of our contributions on our own Christian education and nurture, with little positive result in terms of mission or thrust outward to the world.
Man. So essentially what he's saying is that so 18% of the money that was given, this is in the 60s, only 18% of the money that was given went directly to people or sources outside of the church. Correct?
Yes.
But then the rest, the 82%, went directly to the church for the purpose of, you could argue, ministry, right? Because the idea is that you build up the church so that it can be empowered to do more ministry.
Yes.
But the results, the output of that tactic is not working. At least it didn't work in 1966, and I don't think that's working now either.
It would be so different, such a different story, if we sat down with Jesse and Shelly, who were a homeless couple that we interviewed in episode 4. Insane interview, by the way. If you haven't listened to that one, you should. They've basically been out on the streets. Jesse got both his legs amputated. He's a diabetic. He's got all these health issues, and they've been rejected over and over again by different churches. And if that story had been, Joseph, the first time I went up to a church and said I was in need, man, they took me in. One of the people in the church housed us. They fed us. They clothed us. Other people pitched in. And then, we were able to be off the streets. And then, I got all my Social Security money started coming in right. And then I got my money to get my prosthetic legs in. I'm just so grateful that people would open up their doors and help me out like this and provide for my needs, that, we've just decided to devote ourselves to the church. We're like, what a different story that would be from
Yeah.
from someone that's truly in it, right? Like they're in the thick of life, of the world, of suffering,
Yeah.
of poverty, literally. And that is not the story we got.
No.
He told us that literally he sat across from the benevolence pastor, or the person over basically giving out funds from the church, from a very large church with more than enough money to supply his needs for years, and said, why don't you just get out of here? We're not giving you any more money. That's like verbatim almost what he told us that they said.
Gosh, dude.
And so that is the kind of hypocrisy and the little positive result that Clyde Reed is speaking about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just that church. I mean, he didn't even talk about the money part either. There was other churches that he went into where his wife was talking about how much they were looked down upon because of the way that they dressed. They couldn't afford nice clothes, or people were like, looking down upon them because they knew that they looked homeless or might have been homeless or whatever. And they didn't feel welcomed. Dude, it killed me when she said that.
Yeah.
And that is why it's so frustrating to us about all this that's going on, and why we're helping them, and why we're trying to make a difference. We're trying to be our own experiment, essentially, and saying, like, okay, can we find out a better way? Because if not, we're just as bad.
Yeah.
We're just in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he says in there that we devote all this time to what does he say?
Programs.
Well, like
programs.
even like the education.
Yeah, nurture and education.
Yeah, but I don't even know if that's really true now. As far as, I mean, obviously, me and you both got like degrees in religion and philosophy, Bible theology, whatever. I would not expect everyone to go and spend freaking, all that money on school to go get,
of course,
educated like that. But at the same time, I don't think the education that believers get in churches today I think it's just extremely shallow. It's very much, I feel like the education of the local church typically is the gospel of sin management. That's like the essence of the church education, is how you're going to go to church every Sunday and you're going to learn how to manage your sin.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
I can try. I won't be able to.
Can you give me like an example of?
Yeah. I won't be able to word it as well as Dallas Willard. But
of managing my sin versus kingdom living.
Example.
Like say
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I messed up and I sinned, and I go to God and I say, Lord, forgive me. Like I've sinned and I need you to remove this guilt from me. Why is that not the right response?
Yeah, well, it's because, so he coins this phrase, the gospel of sin management, because it is a part of the gospel. Mm. Part of the gospel is that when you submit your life to Christ, you are expected to live differently. You should have, like the Bible says, you should have fruits that are evidence of your faith, right? So you should stop living in sin. You should stop, going and, engaging in sexual impurity, or whatever, anger, contempt,
Insert any kind of sin.
any sin, yeah, that is expected of the believer because you're trying to model the life of Christ, right? But that's only half of the gospel. The other half is that, like Jesus says, is it's once you submit your life to him, you are now entered into the kingdom of heaven. You are now a part of this. You're now a part of his kingdom, this community of believers, and you share in the power that lived inside of Christ, the Holy Spirit power that now lives inside of you, and you can walk in that. And so this gospel of sin management, it almost completely forgets that side, the other side of the gospel, because the whole time is it's all centered on, like what you said, in this certain scenario where you sin and then you get in this cycle of beating yourself up. You get frustrated because you can't figure out why you can't get over this sin that you repeatedly come back to, and that just becomes your entire faith. Is you go to church and the pastor preaches some kind of sermon that makes you feel guilty, and you want like some kind of, it's like the whole altar call, if you're like dealing with this sin, if you're dealing with that, raise your hand. And we're going to be dealing with these things we're constantly going to be battling the flesh. But the point is not to focus on that. The point is to focus on the nature of Christ that's inside of you, and to develop that so that you can live truly free from sin. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
You should really, if you're listening to this, you should really go read Dallas Willard's The Divine Conspiracy, because he describes this so much better than I freaking can. But
and what happens is, this is what it is. Inside of entrepreneurship circles, it's very popular to talk about the be, do, have model.
yes,
And so this actually originated with Jesus. Jesus was the first one that's why he's so brilliant. The kingdom of heaven can be surmised as be, do, have.
yes,
And what that means is, so let me back up. Most of us do have, do, be. We flip it. We try to have the things, then we'll say, once I have this, then I'll do the action.
Once I have enough money, then I'll go and pursue this dream.
Yeah. Or once I get my act together, then I'll be doing good things and I can be a Christian.
Yeah, yes.
But Jesus said the opposite. No, he said, come to me and I will transform you inside so that you will become more Christ-like. And of course, there is also sanctification, which is the continual process of that happening, where your internal is being changed. But what Jesus so brilliantly knew is that when your being begins to change, your actions naturally follow.
Yes.
And when your actions naturally follow, like you begin doing the things that Christ would do, saying the things Christ would say, responding to things in the way Christ would respond. And in turn, you begin to have the things that he had, the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, a peace that surpasses all human knowledge and understanding. Yeah. You begin to have those things. And so what Zachy, you're describing is like when you begin to live as that Christ-like sort of being, in the sense of not like you're divine, but in the sense of a apprentice of Christ, then you naturally start to not sin.
Yeah.
Like, you start to not have those battles as much. You start to become more Christ-like. And much of the Christian church is teaching the opposite.
Yes. Well, it's like the it's the whole, it's kind of like what we talked about before, which I'm trying to remember exactly how I put this, but essentially it's coming to the point where I can remember in my life, I mean, even recently, where it's so many times it's just you kind of just accept like, oh, this is just my struggle, like this is just my sin that I'm gonna have to battle for the rest of my life, like this is just my human nature, which it is, that's true, but the whole point of Christ in living that, what the be, do, have model in the faith is coming to a point where instead of it being easy to respond in anger, instead of it being easy to be jealous, instead of it being easy to fall into those quote unquote human nature sins or faults, whatever you want to call them, instead it truly can be difficult to respond in that way. Which is I had never considered that. I never thought about that until I read the Divine Healing series. I told you about, I had that conversation with my dad. But that's upside down thinking. It's upside down thinking to think, wow, I can live in a way where responding in anger to someone can actually be difficult for me because Christ's nature, I've become so obsessed with, I guess, the life that he lived and trying to model that his nature arises within me. And that I can act as he acted. I can walk and live and respond to people like he did.
That's so good. Yeah, and I think people also tend to put an emphasis on either all you or it's all God. But in truth, what we're speaking about here takes a dual effort on your part and God's part. He will not transform you if you're not willing to be transformed. In fact, you have to put in the work too.
Yeah, it does
to
take
do that.
work.
It takes
Yeah.
work. It takes discipline. That's part of the life of a believer is discipline. And equally so, the Bible talks about so many times where God's grace is sufficient for us. His power is enough for us to handle situations. In fact, we're not going to be tempted more than what we can bear. And when we are tempted, there's going to be a way out. And so it's working in conjunction with the power of Christ and your willpower, both at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not one or the other.
It's truly living with the mentality of just being in the kingdom. Like Jesus said, the kingdom is at hand.
Yeah. It's Jesus pleading 3 times to God, Lord, take this, or to the Father, take this cup of suffering, let it pass from me before he is crucified. And yet he's in prayer and he's doing that, and yet he obeys anyway.
Dude, it's as believers, our ultimate hope, is heaven, right? Like that we'll be eternally with Christ in heaven. That's like the goal. That's the end goal. But that, like, I feel like as Christians, we have a have-do-be mindset with our faith in terms of heaven. But Jesus instead was, no, you can have heaven now. It's a be, do, have. Be in the kingdom, kingdom of heaven now, and you will have it later. You can have it, you can have it now, and you will still have it beyond death, whatever,
Dang, dude,
You're so right, dude. He was the first one to do it, man. The be, do, have model. Jesus was the first entrepreneur.
spiritual entrepreneur.
Yeah. Gosh, dude. And so that's what we're saying, is that I mean, I have grown up in church, dude,
Same.
for as long as I can remember, and I don't even. I mean, dude, I couldn't tell you when I've heard a message like that preached.
Me neither, man. And even there were some times at Sagu where I'd hear people sort of poke at it a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
But no one ever really came out and said it. Oh my gosh. That just reminds me. Another thing that he said, I'll just talk about it. He basically calls it the conspiracy of silence inside the
Dude.
church, where people are so afraid to question God. They're so afraid to ask about difficult questions or voice things that they're really going through because they're afraid of being looked at strange or looked down upon or seen as not good enough Christians or not confident or faithful enough. And they don't question these things even though they feel them, because it takes courage. It's really difficult. It makes you feel like an outsider at times. It makes you feel like there's something might even be wrong with you at times too.
Yeah.
And so it's just easier to pretend like everything's okay, everything's going all right, putting your head in the sand essentially. And it creates what he calls a conspiracy of silence, where everyone is just pretending like it's okay.
Yeah.
That it's okay and that they're okay, when in fact, they may even question the existence of God. But they're an elder at the church. So that they're at this point where they feel they're so far deep in the system that they begin to live this dual life. And that's what leads to hidden sin. That is the seed that leads to hidden sin, because they never feel safe enough to express themselves, express their doubts, express their attractions or frustrations or the inconsistencies of the church or questions about the Bible. They never feel like they can truly question that. And so it becomes this unhealthy thing where darkness is never brought out into the light and can never be dealt with.
Yeah.
Before you know it, they're freaking having an affair with their secretary. It's like, how did they get to this point? You don't just fall into bed with your secretary. Like, it can lead to that. I'm not saying it always does, but it can lead to hidden sin. It's like it's a way that Satan takes an inch and makes it a mile.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to put this together, but we kind of touched on it on Thursday night when we were talking outside of Willies. There seems to be I don't know what you would call it, but there's this thing that happens where you go to this big spiritual, revival, like a retreat or a youth camp or
Conference.
conference, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is. And then you have these big breakthrough moments or these big spiritual highs. And it feels amazing. You feel like you're on cloud 9 and that you've never been like closer to God. You've never felt this amount of freedom before in terms of your faith and just being free from sin, all everything that comes with those big spiritual moments, right? And then like, 3, sometimes even less than this. I was going to say like 2-3 months later, but sometimes even maybe like 2-3 weeks later, it's like you find yourself in the same exact spot that you were in before that occasion.
And you feel even more hopeless now.
And you feel even more hopeless. And then you go to church. You're continuing to go to church. And you might even come to the point where it's like, dang, well, I guess maybe I just didn't believe enough. Maybe I just really didn't have, maybe I still don't have enough faith. Because if I did, I wouldn't be having these problems right now. So then it's like, then you become questioning your faith even more. And it's just this constant cycle. Then it becomes this conspiracy of silence where it's like, dude, you're the guy that went up on stage on testimony night and you freaking said how you were delivered from pornography, and like 3 weeks later you're that same guy, but you don't want to tell anybody that.
Yeah, it's like you don't want to make God look bad.
Yeah. And you don't want to see less righteous. You don't want to you don't want to seem less righteous. You don't want to seem I don't know.
Not good enough.
Yeah, or like a fake.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I guess he really wasn't delivered.
I'm laughing because of the ridiculousness of it all. That like, I mean, just recently had this breakthrough, and it has begun to transform my daily life, Zach.
Yeah.
Of realizing that I don't have to wait until Sunday to be at peace or feel restored or be with God. And I've talked to several other young adults who have described that exact same thing you just mentioned, where what the issue becomes is it implies that those spiritual highs are peak Christianity.
Yes.
And that's how it's supposed to be all the time. And if you're not always crying during worship, and if you're not always getting the chills, then you're just not doing it good enough.
Yeah.
You're just not in the right atmosphere. You're just not pursuing, you're not digging in hard enough.
Yeah.
And the reason that hurts us so much is because it's not true. That the kingdom of God and the things that we have access to, the peace from anxiety and worry, the joy, true joy of the Lord, the faith that we can walk in each and every day, knowing that everything is already okay. And if we were to get hit by a bus, we would immediately be in heaven with Jesus. We can walk with that every moment of every day.
Yeah.
And that is the kingdom of heaven that you were talking about. And so it is just so frustrating to me. I feel robbed, that I've been robbed of this kingdom of heaven experience most of my life. And I can't tell you how many times I've beaten myself up after sinning.
Yeah.
I felt less than. I've gone to a youth thing and been delivered, and only to fall again and again and again.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most hopeless feelings and the most lonely feelings there is.
It eats at your soul.
It really does.
It eats at your soul.
And it makes you, like you said, it makes you question everything. Like, man, there must be something wrong with me and all this stuff. And that's what we're getting at, is that it's a facade. It's not true. It's not truly what Jesus came to give us. It's not how we're supposed to be living. It's very disempowering to live that way.
Yeah.
Constantly seeking the next Sunday or the next Wednesday night or the next prayer meeting or the next youth event or the next conference. Like, man, I can really get back on my game when I'm at this conference or whatever.
Yeah. There's this kind of going a little bit back to the gospel of sin management. There's actually I think it's like a psychological phrase, I guess, that they use for this, but it's called the rebound effect. And it's when you, like, say you're trying to stop a bad habit and you focus so hard on trying to stop this bad habit that you end up actually doing it more. And I mean, I have found that so true in my life sometimes, where it's like, dang, I'm gonna really try to, like, for instance, trying to get up early sometimes. Like, I'll take a week and, like, okay, I'm gonna really try to be an early bird, and I'll wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I'll hit that snooze, dude, and sleep for like 2 more hours than like normal. You know, it's like I'll sleep in later than I would have if I had just set my alarm at the normal time. You know, it's like I'm focusing so hard on the bad habit that there's this weird rebound effect that It's just not helpful. So instead, the better way is to focus on turn your attention to the good habit that you want to start. And so that even just in the deepest level of your thoughts, like focus on having, instead of trying to not have bad thoughts all the time, focus on having good thoughts. And then, so I think, I feel like that's right in line with the gospel of sin management, is we're trying so hard constantly to not be a bad Christian, to not do all these things. But instead of just turning our attention to Christ and truly trying to act and live like he did. And so you have this rebound effect in your faith where you're trying so hard to not sin. You're trying so hard to, I don't know.
No, you said it great.
Yeah.
You did. I mean,
But then you end up, you just find yourself in even a worse state sometimes than you were before. You know?
Yeah.
So.
Gosh, man, that's so freaking relatable. One thing too that we were talking about was how in Matthew, there's a lot of times we hear people talk about the Gospels in sermons and these different things as these one-off lessons. Like, Jesus blesses the children. And Jesus, the children come up to Jesus and the disciples say, "Get these children away." And Jesus says, no, let them all come to me because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And we'll take that and say, well, man, we need to have a childlike faith. We need to have a faith that is fresh and open to possibilities and that type of thing, which is not necessarily wrong, I would say.
Right.
At all.
Right.
And then we'll go right next to the very next passage would be the rich young ruler. And, if you don't know it, it's basically the rich young ruler comes up to Jesus, and he's exactly how he sounds. And he says, I've done everything that the law commands. I've obeyed my father and mother. I've treated my neighbor, like myself. And, I've not murdered. I've not committed adultery. I've done these things. What else do I need to be? What else do I need to do?
To enter the kingdom.
To enter the kingdom, exactly. And Jesus says, what you need to do to be perfect is to give everything you have to the poor and follow me. And we'll say, well, the lesson from that is we shouldn't idolize things in our life. And Jesus will push us to not just do the right things, but to have the right state of heart, which again, not wrong at all.
Yeah.
It's a great message. I've heard that over and over and over again my whole life.
Yeah.
And each time it convicts me in different ways. But after reading these books, what I've seen is the brilliance of how Jesus put all this together is, and you're the one that really told me this, Zach, is how when you look at those two parables or those two stories and you dive a little deeper and you understand how children were seen as a very low social status. They were seen as very low in terms of the social totem pole in Jesus' day. And the disciples would have seen Jesus say, no, the kingdom of heaven belongs such as these, as saying basically the kingdom of heaven belongs to those of low social status. And then he would have contrasted that with when the rich young ruler comes up to them. You need to understand that the disciples would have seen him as someone, as the quintessential GQ model for entering the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
He would have been seen as the guy.
Yeah.
He's the all-star. He's the guy who follows the law. He's rich, he's young, he's powerful, probably. He's a ruler, right? So he's powerful.
Yeah.
And so you have all these things that they would have been looking at him being like, man, he's got it all.
Yeah. If anyone's entering, it's him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And for only Jesus to say, basically in the next passage, that it's more difficult for a rich person to enter the eye of to enter the
For a camel,
heaven.
it's more difficult for a camel to
go into the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
And they're so dismayed that they said, then who can be saved? And again, you'll hear it preached like, maybe the first level would be like, oh, you can't have money. Money's not good.
Yeah, money's root of all evil.
Yeah, and then you'll go to the next level, which is like, I don't know. Like it'll just go like a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, and again, the same discourse like that we're following, it's the very person that the disciples have been told their whole lives, just got freaking dive bombed by a June bug, have been told their whole lives is going to enter the kingdom of heaven. In fact, is going to have the hardest time. And so,
which to them was like, I mean, they were just dumbfounded.
They were like, what chance do I have as a disciple of a fisherman to enter the kingdom of heaven if this guy can't even get into it? Like, I'm hopeless, essentially.
Yeah.
But the message that Jesus is conveying is the availability of the kingdom of God to those like a child, those of low social status, and of the upside down nature of the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
Whereas people who are seen socially as to have it all together, maybe it's the person at church that you think has the perfect life, the perfect family, job, successful, they've got money, they're an elder of the church, like whatever, they may have the most wretched heart you've ever seen, but you don't know, right? And so you think, well, they're definitely getting in, but in truth, Jesus is saying, no, it belongs to different people than you may realize, than society may realize.
Yeah. I think of like it's like the perfect, the perfect churchgoer, the person who probably sings on stage for worship, the person who probably maybe gives a crap ton of money in offering.
Never misses a Sunday.
Never misses a Sunday. Is at all the Bible studies. Maybe he leads a Bible study. He goes to morning prayer. Maybe he's an elder or maybe even a pastor or something. It's like that kind of person that most believers sitting in a service would be like, dang, like that guy is he's on fire for Christ, dude. Like, if anyone's not a lukewarm Christian, it's him. He's on fire. It's like that kind of person where he's doing all these things that make him look like what you said, like the all-star, the guy that's going to be in the kingdom for sure, when
it may not be the case.
That may not be the case.
I want to read this part about, he says, it sounds strange to suggest that religious organizations and religious leaders reject spiritually sensitive people. It does not sound nearly so strange when we recall the reception given to persons like Luther, Joan of Arc, or St. Francis by the religious organizations of their day. Nor is it so difficult to understand when we recall the treatment accorded Jesus of Nazareth by the religious leaders of his time. The sad but inescapable truth is that we in the modern churches would crucify him as readily as if he came today. In truth, we do it daily. We crucify him daily when it comes to us in the guise of the laboring man, or the slum dweller, or the ex-convict, or a strangely dressed woman to whom we refuse the communion of our supper table. Gosh. So this is, again, what he's talking about with the conspiracy of silence. He says, the other side of this same coin is the appalling spiritual poverty in our church fellowships. Speak to the average church officer today, and you will discover that he has little awareness of his denomination's history or beliefs, little religious conviction, often doubts the existence of God. And sadly, he has had to carry on a smiling deception in regard to his doubts, for his church has never allowed him an opportunity to admit them honestly and work through them. Or speak to a group of church people about the power of silent prayer and observe their discomfort. Observe a deacon's meeting in some church and note the simple, or he says the perfunctory opening prayer, basically meaning simply a curtsy in the direction of God, a shallow prayer, lacking a relevance or power for those listening. The truth of the matter is that the spiritual life of the laity, or the church leaders, is almost non-existent in many churches, and that of the clergy not much better. The adult members of churches today rarely raise serious religious questions for fear of revealing their doubts or being thought of as strange. There is an implicit conspiracy of silence on religious matters in the churches. The conspiracy covers up the fact that the churches do not change lives or influence conduct to any appreciable degree. Dang!
Gosh,
That hurts.
man. It's crazy, dude, because I mean, I don't know. I feel like I consider myself very fortunate, and I'm very thankful and grateful for the friends that I had growing up, because I did grow up in I went to a private Christian school that was a part of a church, a mega church. And I went there from kindergarten to, senior year of high school. So I grew up in this Christian bubble.
Yeah.
That was my world pretty much. But in that bubble, I did have friends that right around late middle school and then even more so going into high school and late high school, I had friends I was really close with, and then we would have these we were able to be honest with our doubts with each other, and we talked about these things that we read in the Bible that didn't really seem to line up with what some of our leaders were saying, some of the things that our leaders were saying and teaching to us, and we were able to have those conversations, even though at that time it was, so many of our thoughts and complaints, whatever, were just they were not as developed,
Yeah.
But I still had that. I was able to have those honest doubts with my really close friends at that time. And then even more so, not like what we had just talked about briefly before, on second floor, dude, and how we had that together. We had this community of guys who we were unafraid to talk about anything, or there was nothing that you could say to me, or any one of those guys that could say to me that would make me be like, oh, I just guess you're not a very good Christian. There's
You
nothing,
can't be part of our group anymore.
Yeah, I can't hang out with you anymore, dude. Sorry. There's nothing you could have told me.
If someone came out and was like, I really am contemplating worshiping Satan, I even that to that degree would be like, wow, did not see that coming.
It would be shocking.
It would be very shocking, but I just can't say that I would just immediately disassociate with that person.
Yeah,
we
would talk about it. Dude, tell me why.
Tell me why. You better be able to defend that idea, because we will go hard, dude.
Yeah. But that's just you're just like what you said, dude. That I've never really felt like I was living in the kingdom more than during that time.
Yes.
Dude. And it just felt having those relationships and living in that kind of community is so life-giving. Instead of my soul feeling empty, it is fulfilling. I feel fulfilled.
It's empowering.
It's empowering. And it's nothing to do with our own strength. It's the work of Christ's love within us and shared between us.
It's almost like it all got unbottlenecked. Like the way that we're all talking about right now, we have some theories on it or whatever. We have some idea of what it might be, but the way we lived on second floor and the relationships we had and the way we communicated and the openness and the safety and the vulnerability and
and still have the relationships that we still have.
Today. That we still have.
Yeah.
It unlocked a different experience, a different level. It just opened up a floodgate of a different way of living I didn't know was possible.
Yeah, it was a different level of existence.
Yes, dude.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to say it.
Yeah. And that is what we want to see in the church. Like I just imagine like an entire church body living like that, dude.
Dude,
and what could that do? What could that do?
Just one church body of 300 to 500 people catching this and like really and truly grasping it would have the potential to change an entire city. I mean, dude, it would. And that is why the message of Christ spread so rapidly after Jesus was resurrected.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is why, dude. I mean, look at the new, a great example is Ananias and Sapphira, like talking about the New Testament church where people were selling everything they owned, or most of what they owned, or huge plots of land, and they were giving it straight to the poor. And that was seen by everyone around them, that these Christians who many thought were crazy were doing genuine things to help others that could not be ignored.
Yeah.
It can't be ignored. And things like during the bubonic plague,
Something
plague,
like that.
something like that. Blue bonnet plague. They stayed behind in the hospitals to help those with the plague. And so many people came to Christ because of that, seeing that selfless act. And we look back on things like that and marvel, like, wow, what a time that must have been.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I wonder what that's like, essentially.
Yeah.
And the way he says, the way he puts this into words is just so gut-wrenching to me when he says, what the local church has become makes it impossible for the average American to take its life-shaking gospel seriously. Because the gospel is life-shaking.
Yeah.
But it's so hard for us to take it seriously.
It really is. It really is. If I'm being completely honest with myself,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. From the way that I've been churched,
Yes, I was going to say.
it's very hard to take that seriously.
If someone like us who's grown up in the church can't take it seriously,
Who can?
that's a problem.
Yeah.
Not just grown up in church, but been educated, degreed, like served in the church to
Yeah.
every degree of Christian you could be, essentially. We have a large experience in that category. And so we're not just speaking like from what we see, we're speaking from what we're living, what we've
Yeah.
seen, what we've lived.
Gosh, dude.
I've just never had words to describe it before.
Yeah. Something, dude, that's always kind of not sat well with me is this whole, I'm going to say this. The whole, church is supposed to look like a hospital. Church, it's supposed to be filled with sick people that are, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like that
Yeah.
whole, like,
Mm-hmm.
and I agree. I understand the sentiment behind that. I understand the intent behind that, because Jesus says that in the Gospels, how he's saying, healthy people don't need a doctor. Like the sick people, it's the sick people that need help. That's what he says to the Pharisees.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, because in all actuality, it was the Pharisees that were truly sick. They were just blind. They were spiritually blind and couldn't see it. But back to the point, I feel like sometimes I just don't think that for believers, I don't think that the message of Christ really is that, I'm talking about when I say church, I'm saying Big C Church, I'm saying body of Christ. I don't think that when you become a believer, that when you become a disciple, that you're supposed to stay sick. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think as a believer, you should, like, obviously there's whole, like, the progressive sanctification. You actively are becoming a better person, but you should, like, believers should be empowered.
Yes.
They should be empowered. They should not remain. Yes, the gospel was for sick people, but
It's meant to make you well.
yeah. The catch, though, is that doesn't, I don't want to, I'm not trying to preach or speak some kind of prosperity gospel, that being well doesn't always mean materially, like in terms of,
Or
becoming wealthy or
that things are going to go well all the time, or that you're going to be perfect.
Yes, you will.
But you'll be made well spiritually.
Yes. It is I kind of talked about this a couple episodes ago. Oh, actually, no. That episode didn't air. but as a believer, you will face trials. You will, like Jesus says, we will suffer in this life. But it's through those sufferings that we actually become better and become more like Christ. And that's why the disciples rejoiced when they were whipped, like, for the first time after preaching the streets. They rejoiced that rejoiced in the fact that they were able to share in the suffering of Christ. I guess that's kind of a whole nother that's a tangent of the point we're making here. But yeah, the whole point I'm trying to say is that I don't want to stay sick, dude. I don't want to be,
Me neither.
I want to feel empowered as a believer.
Yeah.
I want to see believers empowered.
Yeah. And what we're attempting to do with this podcast, with this idea, the second floor experience idea, is offer some kind of experiment, of alternate route, a getting back to what this is meant to be. And the reason it's so difficult is it's hard to look or point to something that's frankly doing it super, super well.
Yeah.
And again, not from like a high and mighty perspective, simply from a humble, we're trying to figure this out. We're in the trenches with you all listening. And, whether you're a believer or non-believer, atheist, agnostic, Hindu, Buddhist, Jehovah's Witness, Muslim, like Mormon. Now I gotta go down the line. I can't leave any out. Jainist. No, I'm just kidding.
Satanist.
You're safe here. For real.
Yeah,
Like,
100%. Seriously.
We want this to be a place where people can come and listen and genuinely feel safe enough to speak their doubts, leave a comment, or share it to someone, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
especially believers too, though.
100%.
Like, I think a lot of this is we're just trying to like illuminate, just shed light on this problem that's so hard to put your finger on.
Give people language to describe if you're feeling the same way.
Yeah. Then we're also trying to experiment and find the solution.
Yeah. We want a solution. We don't just want to seem like we're complaining about all this stuff and being armchair quarterbacks. Like, starting a church is freaking hard. Running a church is freaking hard. And I think a lot of times we get confused that if something is hard, it's right. Just because starting a church is hard, just because running a church is difficult, doesn't always mean it's the exact way we're supposed to be doing it. Or, like, I don't think that I don't really know where I was going with that, but, I hope this will wake people up too, to a sense of, like, just look around you, be observant of, you have to do this is what I want to say. You have to do your own research.
Yeah,
So many
for
times we just
sure.
rely on our pastors that think that they know everything, or we rely on our church leaders or whatever. It's like you are biblically mandated to challenge whenever someone brings the word of God, because that stops hypocrisy. It stops blasphemy. It stops these things, because if you're an educated believer, you can have a educated discourse on difficult topics, and that helps. This critical thinking is what creates a healthy environment. It's what keeps out cult-like thinking or groupthink
Yeah,
or
yeah.
control. Like it
It
empowers you as a
yeah, it
believer too.
inspires growth as
Yes.
well. It's a process of maturing.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
Dude, what you said, can you talked about this, about Dallas Willard and how Jesus coined the phrase or the term hypocrite. And dude, that was, it's so good, man. It's
Gosh,
so good.
dang. I think I actually took a picture of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh, if you haven't read Divine Conspiracy,
What are you doing?
that's like that's a must. That's a must read right there.
So I don't have it. I didn't take a picture, but basically, Dallas Willard talks about how Jesus coined the phrase hypocrite, and what it comes from in the classical Greek term is it's a theatrical term meant to show basically like a two-faced or a double-sidedness, someone playing an act or playing a part. And so when Jesus speaks to the Pharisees saying, "You hypocrites, like you're like whitewashed tombs, you look great on the outside, but you're filled with dead man's bones on the inside." When he's talking about a hypocrite, everyone in the crowd would have understood that he was literally coining a brand new phrase, and they would have understood it to mean that the religious and political leaders that they look up to or that they have been being led by are basically actors in a play.
Yeah.
They're putting on a show,
Yeah.
is what that word entails, which is so funny to think about the Pharisees' reactions to that.
Dude, oh
just
my
like
gosh.
kills
Yeah.
me. That
Oh my gosh.
Jesus is literally making up phrases on the spot, just flaming them in front of everyone, when their whole identity is on how they're being perceived. To know that he was literally attacking the core of their identity
Yeah.
is so crazy to think about. But
And would have been crazy as for the people listening, like the people that looked up to these religious leaders. They would have been
they're like,
like
"Oh,
just in pure shock that
what?
yeah.
He said what?" He called them actors. Because what's interesting is there was actually a theater built really close to Nazareth, where Jesus grew up. And it's actually probable that Joseph, Jesus' father, and Jesus himself may have worked on a theater. They may have helped to build one.
That's crazy.
And there were several other sort of mega theaters, you could say, built by Herod around more central cities. And so that was sort of on the up and up. I don't know if that's accurate, but it was definitely around, I would say. And it was becoming more popular, I think is a more realistic way to say it. And so it's just so, it again shows the brilliance of Jesus as a communicator,
Yeah.
as a wordsmith, as a cult, as Jesus literally created culture in that moment by saying,
Yeah.
coined a phrase that we now use today widely, not as like,
Believers and non-believers.
yes,
Everyone loves to call people hypocrites. Dude.
Everyone
Yeah.
loves it. Rolls off the tongue so nicely,
Yeah.
hypocrite. Like
Yeah.
people say it with a freaking passion.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most hated people that are those who do one thing and say the other. Truly.
Yeah.
And I loved when he said that, man. Shows the brilliance of Jesus
Gosh.
and how he didn't hold back. I love
Yeah.
that. That's what I think we're learning to do with this podcast is I know for myself, I was a bit weary of talking straight on about all this stuff in the beginning because, once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no getting it back. But this is our Pastor Abby.
We'll just leave that there. Yeah.
We're not gonna give anybody context to that.
Maybe one day. I've been trying to think about that, actually. Yeah, man. That's it. That's it. That whole thing. Did you read that part from gosh, I keep forgetting his name. Clyde Reed?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember if you read it on here or not, but just like the whole self-preservation. I forget how he says it, but did you read that part already? Or
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Do you want to?
I'm sure people love hearing me read on the podcast.
It was just so true, dude. Of how, at least I think, what the state of the church right now, and I guess then too.
I can't find it right now.
I mean, either way, he kind of touched on it before when he talks about how everything was just centered on the development of the institution, right? And like,
Oh, found it.
okay, I'll wait.
The average church today has an extremely active program, at least one worship service each week, youth fellowships, women's fellowships, ladies' circles, committees galore, men's clubs, choirs, etc. The remarkable feature of most of these meetings is that they are primarily oriented around the local church and its immediate fellowship. Most of the groups mentioned pay lip service to their concern for others, may even devote a portion of their earnings from cake sales and bean suppers to support some worthy enterprise, and probably collect food baskets for the needy on holidays. The programs offered by many of these groups reveal their determination to avoid anything remotely related to the Christian faith. They offer programs on flower arranging, fashion shows, movies on fishing off the coast of Florida, musicals featuring the children of the group's officers, colored slides on anything at all, cosmetic demonstrations, and hat making. Their lack of purpose is revealed by their universal tendency to invite a speaker, any speaker, to, quote, come and talk to our group. What would you like me to speak on? Oh, anything you suggest would be fine with us. I know the ladies would be thrilled. How about the use of primitive pencil sharpeners among the Bantu tribes prior to the blight of 1868? That would be just lovely.
That was good.
Yeah, I didn't have the whole self-preservation part in there, but I think it kind of captured the idea. I'm looking for it still. Oh, was it on the tithe part, I think?
Maybe.
Oh, yeah, I think it is. Basically talking about how all of these programs and the money that's brought in is simply meant for, most of it simply is used for and ends up as self-preservation for the church itself.
Yeah. Well, it's literally like what I wanted to say was that just the story that you just told me about a certain someone
Yeah.
and how it's like, you get involved in the church, maybe you become on staff, maybe you're volunteering, whatever, and then they ask you to do this one thing, and you do that really well. Then they ask you to do this one thing, and then you do that, and then it's like they just then you come to a point where it's like you're giving so much of yourself that it's very taxing, and you can feel your life kind of like slipping away, at least your healthy life, and you might think okay, well, is there something you can do that, like, maybe you go to the church and ask, is there something you guys can do to help me? So, because my life is going downhill because I'm doing so many things. And it's like, the point is that it's like this system and this machine that we built, it's like, it's so, I don't know. It just so easily takes advantage of people under this guise of like building the church up. Or like, we really need a bass player, or we really need, like, whatever it is, but, or otherwise we we really need your money, otherwise the church is just going to fail. It's like it's this self-preservation instinct that this machine, this institution has. And people, the believers, end up paying the price for it. That's the problem.
Yes. And then are made to feel guilty, or just feel guilty, put the guilt on themselves when they can't inevitably keep up.
Yeah.
When they inevitably burn out and have to take a step back.
Yes.
They're seen as less than, or not as worthy, or not as a good Christian. I found the thing you were talking about. When we study the life of the churches carefully, one of the most striking features is their self-centeredness. This is how the very first chapter starts, by the way. For institutions which are constantly exhorting others to be mature, the churches reveal an enormous immaturity, if maturity is to be measured by the extent to which one moves from self-centeredness to concern for others. The churches talk about being concerned for others, but demonstrate by their programming, their budgets, and their actions that they are primarily interested in self-preservation and self-promotion. Dang.
Gosh, dude.
Dude, you want to hear it freaking... So he quotes another guy who wrote a book called The Comfortable Pew from Canada, Pierre Burton.
The Comfortable Pew.
He is not a churchman, but he was commissioned by the Anglican Church in Canada to write the book in which he says, if large masses of people are bored with the church, it is surely because the church has failed to excite their imaginations or their consciences. And it has failed to do this, it seems to me, because it has had very little to say to them in terms of the 20th century world in which they live. And the great issues of our time, the voice of the church, when it has been heard at all, has been weak, tardy, equivocal, or irrelevant. In those basic conflicts that ought to be tormenting every Christian conscience, questions of war and peace, of racial brotherhood, of justice versus revenge, to name three, the church has trailed far behind the atheists, the agnostics, the free thinkers, the journalists, scientists, social workers, and even, on occasion, the politicians. In other areas, the church has simply stood aloof.
Gosh, bro. Holy crap. Can we go back to that sentence where he talks about, I don't know, go to like the third or fourth sentence.
Okay. It has failed to excite their imagination, has failed to do this, it seems, because it has had very little to say to them in terms of the 20th century world in which they live.
Yes. Yes, dude. That is how I felt, dude. Going to so many of these young adult, like, groups, gatherings, or youth groups or whatever. It's like you go there, like, I'm a 25-year-old guy trying to make it in the world, trying to figure out life, And then I go to some group or whatever, and they want to do all these freaking like middle school games and these, I don't know, man, just like these
Trivial
things, dude.
It's trivial.
And it's trivial when I know that there are probably other people in there who are, like me, dealing with life and trying to figure this thing out. And I'm sure there are people who are going through some really hard things that they're afraid to talk about. But we go there and just do these silly, trivial things that it's like, how can we take our faith seriously then? Like, that's what's so frustrating. Because they really aren't speaking to the world that we live in.
No. So then where are we left to go? Freaking Andrew Tate, freaking like any influencer that you find remotely relatable.
Yeah.
That's where you end up.
Yeah.
Subconsciously or consciously trying to figure things out.
I can tell you that's where I've gone.
Yeah.
I can tell you 100%. I go to freaking Alex Ramosi. I go to freaking Patrick Bet-David. I do Andrew Tate. Like, I don't know, man, because they're just real. They're just real. They say they speak to the world that I'm living in.
That is it, dude. And coming from the church, that hurts so bad to know
Yeah.
that that's the truth. I would rather put my head in the sand and pretend that that's not true. Because it's more comfortable.
That's the truth, dude. That's me being 100% honest.
But if we want to see a reverse in these trends of young people leaving the church, of people leaving the church, of shallow faith, of pastors coming out with moral failures, of church leaders having to step away from burnout, we have to be courageous enough. Everyone has to be courageous enough to talk about these things. And not just talk about them, but try something different. Even if it doesn't work, even if it's silly or it's not the norm or you're made fun of for doing it, at least you're in the arena. At least you're trying. So what if they make fun of me?
Sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
Dude, I just, in the war of our book, he says, he's talking about like living your dream or whatever and encountering failure. And, he had like the author had this experience where he encountered like a pretty big failure. And a friend essentially told him, like, dude, so what? Like, this is what you want to do, right? Like, this is what you signed up for, right? This is the price of being in the. He says this is the price of being in the arena rather than on the sidelines.
Gosh, do you know how many times I've wanted to quit my business?
Dude.
Do you know how many times I've wanted to go get a freaking normal job and go do these different things because of how freaking hard it is, man. But that is the cost of being in the arena.
It's the cost of being in the arena, bro. I don't want to be on the freaking sidelines, dude.
I've been on the sidelines for so long. And now that I'm finally in the arena of particularly business, which I've wanted to be in for so long, it is both extremely frustrating and extremely rewarding to be in the arena.
Yeah.
Because you come face to face with your own imperfections, your own failures, your faults, your inconsistencies, your lack of congruency with what you say, with what you do.
Yeah.
But through that frustration, if you survive in the arena, you're able to grow. And if you find yourself not growing, if you look back 2-3 years ago at yourself and you're like, man, I'm kind of in a similar, almost the same spot I was before, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, literally in the same place you were
Yeah.
before. Maybe it's because you haven't gotten in the arena. Maybe it's because you need to take a step out and risk failure, whatever that looks like for you. It could be as simple as talking to a new person next week. It could be as scary as starting a business. It could be as scary as quitting your job or applying for a new job or having a serious conversation with your spouse or partner about things that you're frustrated about them with at risk of them getting upset. It could be anything. But man, to be in the arena, to know that you're with like similar souls that are striving for
in the
greatness,
fight, dude.
in the
In the
fight
fight,
for
yeah.
whatever area you choose to be and choose to fight in, that is such a fulfilling thing.
Yeah.
It gives you purpose. It helps give you purpose.
I feel like that is what we're trying to do with our faith.
Yes.
So we're trying to step into the arena
Yes.
instead of just being on the freaking sidelines, man. Like, that's the point of this whole thing, is we're trying to
Get in the game.
get in the
Put me
freaking
in,
game,
coach.
dude. Yeah.
Put me in.
100%
I'm
though,
ready.
dude. 100%. I'm tired I just feel like the church, man, like we're on the sidelines, dude. We're on the sidelines of the freaking world.
And that is what we're going to do with the second Blue Experience. First of all, that's what we're already doing with helping people like Jesse and Shelly.
Yeah.
That is getting in the game. But even more so, as our community continues to grow, it's as simple as keeping an ear open for needs that are that people have, and then putting in the work to get outside of yourself, outside of your routine, figure out how to meet that need. And that itself goes so far for people. They're like, you would stop your whole life just to help me with this? Just to help me with this? Wow, I want to be more like you. Where is this coming from? Because I know I'm not that selfless. Where's that coming from? You'd be like, I'm not either, but I'm commanded to do so. Let me tell you about where this is coming from. It's really not that complicated, but it's very hard.
There you go. That's the answer to the first question. How to be salty.
It's simple but not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, full circle.
Then there's no need to be a sleazy salesman for your faith.
Gosh, you don't have to be a brand ambassador for your local church. I just made that up on the spot. You like that one?
Man,
You don't have to be an affiliate marketer for Christ.
Yeah, I like that. Matt, I'm gonna quick shout really quick. My brother sent me this. He said, consumer of the church instead of a citizen of the kingdom.
Dang! Cooking. So, I've been really thinking about that idea we talked about the other day. I think it was yesterday, actually, of doing those like little shorts or whatever, of following like these little paper trails or whatever of what the kingdom has, and then we could label it like, quote, God evaders, and then it has you going through down the line of all these extra stipulations the church puts on you.
Yeah.
And I'm really struggling to come up with a name. Like, okay, if we're gonna like compare and contrast these two, it'd be nice to have a catchy name. So we have God evaders, and then kingdom persuaders. I don't know, like something like that. Kingdom instigators, kingdom perpetuators.
Are you saying the
right way versus the way we've been doing it?
Okay.
Or like kingdom centered versus
the God evaders?
Yeah.
Basically.
I don't know.
We'll have
to stew on that one. Bonus points if it rhymes.
Yeah, I'll have to do some thinking on that.
If you made it this far in the podcast, leave a comment what you think it should be.
We'll give you a shout.
The truth is, we're all God evaders in different ways at different times.
So true.
But I mean, if we're gonna get noticed, we're gonna get this message out, dude. We gotta be bold.
Yeah. That's the point, though, dude, is that it's the recognition. It's the recognition of that was the difference between, for instance, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, and the man that was blind, is that the Pharisees failed to recognize that they're spiritually blind.
And
They failed to recognize that they're serving the God of Vaders.
And didn't they say, like, you need to... didn't they say when he came up to him, they gave him something to do, like he was supposed to go do something at the... I don't know, maybe I'm messing that up.
Yeah, like some kind of like cleansing ritual, or I think.
Yeah. And maybe, I think... I don't know. I might be messing that up. I don't know if I want to go any further.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But
But
there's just a tendency to put more restrictions or impose
Yeah.
more laws as humans.
yeah, and that was the difference, is that Jesus said it was because, like, the blind man recognized, obviously, that he was physically blind, but also that he was spiritually blind and was in need of Jesus, the Savior. And then Jesus tells the Pharisees that it's because they think they can see, spiritually, saying that instead that they're actually blind. They fail to recognize, and that's what I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that's what we're trying to say, is that truly we are all, I mean, we're on the God of Vader's side, man.
Yeah, we have tendencies to evade God.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I guess I don't want to, yeah.
We're trying to live in the kingdom.
Yes.
Well, I emptied the tank.
Yeah, I feel like that was pretty good. Pretty good.
This has been therapeutic for me. I hope it's helped you as well. Listen,
Fire's pretty much dead.
fire's dead. Batteries are probably low on everything.
Yeah.
So, listen, we really want to get this out to anyone and everyone who's willing to listen. So, if you feel like this impacts you in any way, share it. Send it to somebody. Rile them up a little bit. Leave a comment. Like, that stuff
Yeah.
really... That stuff helps us know that we're reaching the right people. Or
if you hate us.
If you hate it,
Yeah.
let us know.
Let us know.
Don't be bashful. We have the Hate Olympics for a reason.
Yeah.
You're in a competition to see if you can leave the most creative hate comment, in fact.
Yeah.
So don't leave us hanging.
I've actually been pretty disappointed, because
I've been disappointed.
we've been lacking in hate comments.
People have been slacking, man.
Well, I guess we can call it on that, dude.
Signing off for now. Peace.
Gosh. It's like so dark behind the light. I can't even see the camera.
I want to talk to you. Not now. Later. No, now.